All right, welcome everybody. Today I've got Jake Stoddard of Fenceworks. He's a third generation fence contractor serving right outside Chicago. They found an interesting new revenue stream that we're going to go on to later in the podcast. And for everyone who hasn't joined us, welcome to Post by Post, the podcast where fence and deck builders share the real stories, the real experiences, and the real decisions behind the fences they build and the businesses they grow. So, Jake, before we dive into your story, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, a little about your company, and some one of the things that makes you unique?
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. Super excited to be here today. So I'm Jake Stoddard. As you mentioned, I'm third generation here at Fenceworks. We also go by the guy on 41. We can get into that story a little bit later. Uh, but yeah, been around for now 59 years. Started in 1967 by my grandfather, Stan Asher. He's referred to as the guy on 41. Quick snippet. We used to be on the highway, Route 41 in Highland Park, Illinois. We're now in Northbrook, but we were there for decades. But we've been doing fences since 1967, full service fence installation and sales consultation. And then about 30 years ago, or a little bit longer, mid to late 90s, we added playgrounds, basketball hoops, and trampolines. But really, what separates us from the rest here in this area, there's definitely not a company here in this area that does all four: fences, basketball hoops, playgrounds, and trampolines. So you can get your outdoor recreational equipment for the kiddos and also add that privacy and security to your yard. So they kind of go hand in hand, one
Yeah,
stop shop there. But really, what makes us unique, we're not a franchise. We're not backed by private equity. We're just one location, one family, no call centers. It's just me, my grandpa, my dad, my grandma, my uncle, and a few others. So it's really tight knit, different
yeah.
experience.
But that said, I mean, Fenceworks does a good amount of volume for having such a tight knit crew, which is great. I think there's a lot to learn from there that I hope we get to dive into. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, on this. Let's start at the. I like to start a lot of these with the first section. It's called the first post, so it's really like the beginning of everything. I'm curious, the first post, maybe the first post even set by Fenceworks. Do you know how your grandfather eventually got into fencing?
I do. I do. My grandfather, before 1967, was working for another local fence company. In the 60s. Wasn't a ton of fence companies out there, and eventually split off and started his own company, but he was working for another. And his first job, he hadn't hired installers yet or crews or anything. So I know it was like in the middle of December or January. It was snowing out, and he was just by himself. Uh, now he's a bit older now, but back in 1967, he was still young and hungry, and was just post by post himself for his first customer. And he said it was cold, but he said it really taught him the ins and outs, and wanted to start off doing it all by himself. So from the sales to the installation to the marketing, right? If he could touch on each thing himself, it was easier for him to onboard other people, which really ended up just being mostly family members throughout our entire generation. So yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. How do you know how those first couple of years, was it a pretty steady success, or were there some rough times getting started? How did the marketing and growth go back
Yeah,
then?
for sure. I think what's really cool is in his office, which is, right down from mine here. He's got from the 60s, 70s, all these mailers and pamphlets that he's created, and they started off like whatever you would imagine like a mailer might look like in the 70s, like, black and white, like just very basic, but has a lot of nostalgic to it. That's where it started, right? And that time, that was really you could knock on doors if you wanted to. There was, direct mail pieces or stuff you would hand out, but from my understanding, that was really it. But he did a really good job of that, and really built that up in that early days. And we can get into what's evolved in the last few decades. But that's where it
Yeah.
started, was those pamphlets and those bifolds or trifolds.
And you still send, I mean, mail drops are still a huge part of your marketing strategy today.
You know what? He'll never stop it, and I intend to continue it for generations to come. I live downtown in a high rise, so I'm not typically used to checking my mail as frequently as the homeowners do. But it's always returned an ROI for us. People remember it. We've been doing it again ever since 1967, and it's colorful. It stands out. It's clear. People, get it in the fall and in the spring, both in the city and the suburbs where we serve. And we're
Yeah.
very direct in what households are getting it the best we can to make sure we're not sending it to people that, don't own a home yet, that can't put a fence in or a playground, right? So we have some levers that we can pull to make sure that we're targeting the right audience with those mailers.
Yeah. I'm sure when those levers went in for the first time, because I mean, there for sure was not that much filtering when your grandfather did it the first time. It was literally just like, hey, walk west as far as you
Sure,
can and
sure.
drop these in every house.
Right.
I'm sure. So, I mean, I would love to have been a fly on the wall or even just see the historical statistics of like, okay, now we can filter by zip codes. Like, how
Sure.
did that change our distribution? It must have been some really big windfalls
Yeah,
when those
for
came
sure.
out.
Outside of household income and zip codes, again, there's only so much data that's available that you can tap into. But again, there's other means of marketing we could talk about, the newer age stuff that you could be a bit more direct. But
Mm.
yes, it's way better than it used to. So that's for
Yeah,
sure.
how cool is that?
Yeah,
Now, I know I'd love to spend more time talking about now that like the modern business and some of the decisions you made and maybe some of
sure.
the wisdoms you guys have picked up along the way. This is kind of like the digging deep part of the post by post. One thing that I think is very interesting that you said about being what makes you unique is this playground equipment, recreation equipment angle that you have. Can you walk me through like how did that decision evolve?
Sure. Yeah. So back, 30 some years ago when my grandfather introduced the playgrounds, the basketball hoops and the trampolines, there just wasn't a ton, if any, local businesses that had that. Right. So I think back in the day it was, some woodworker or, handyman, however you want to call it, or maybe a fireman or a police officer that was looking to do some side work that knew his way around wood. That's how people, got playgrounds. And this is before some big suppliers or brands in those respective spaces were really, super popular. So my grandfather saw a gap in the market throughout the North Shore of Chicago suburbs, in the Chicagoland, greater Chicagoland area, and it's been a hit. And when we were on Route 41, which was a highway, now we're a bit tucked away in an industrial park district here in Northbrook. So the foot traffic or the drive-bys are not as immense as they were when we were on the highway.
Hmm.
But we had back on Route 41, playgrounds, basketball hoops lining up, all over. So people could not pass us and know, wait, that company does playgrounds. It was very loud. It was as if it was like a free billboard in a sense. Of course, we had, in that regard. So it was interesting. He saw a gap in the market, hit it, and it's been very successful for us in that regard. So yeah,
That's so interesting because I mean, I talk to a lot of fence contractors and I've seen them add complementary services. Most commonly decks, I'd say, is probably the most common one. But you guys went into recreational equipment. I'm sure a lot's changed since you made that decision in the 90s. How has things like e-commerce impacted the trampoline basketball hoop market for you?
great question. So, yeah, for all of our services, like our fence crews are doing fences, our my basketball hoop installer does basketball, and so forth, playground, trampoline. So it's everyone's dedicated to that particular craft. There's some maybe other big box stores locally that some guy might be doing your jacuzzi or another product, and then the next is doing a basketball hoop. So we're very specialized in what products our installers are aligned with that particular product. But your question about e-commerce, that's been a huge disruptor. So, not to name names, but whether it's a sporting goods store or a big box retailer or online e-commerce giant, if you want to say,
Hmm.
the difference between us and them is really that white glove service, right? If you order online, these products, basketball hoops, playgrounds can be hundreds or thousands of pounds sometimes, right? So having those dropped on your driveway in boxes and then having to find someone else to install it or DIY when your kids and their friends and family are using these recreational products, there's a lot of liability at stake, right? So to trust some random person yourself or some online retailer with that's a little bit faceless, right? Whether it's a call center or you're up to reading the descriptions and hoping for the best. When it's paper towels, right? Go for it, right? But when it's these, an investment, both financially, but also they're long-term things. These aren't one-year rentals. These are products you're going to use for potentially 20, 30 years and generation after generation. There's so many times where we have customers that bought a playground from us 30 years ago, and now their grandkids or kids are looking to the playground and they just got to get a little bit refurbished. So all said and done, There are disruptors with the e-commerce angle, but I think
Mhm.
locally people here prefer and are willing to invest in a premium product and service to ensure that it will last a long time and that their kids will be safe and love it for a long time. So, yeah.
That's cool. Do you feel like that same model? Like if I were to pick you up, for instance, and drop you in a totally another city to start the next Fenceworks location, do you feel like you'd start off focusing like on both the strength, the fencing and the recreational equipment, or would you choose one or the other for like a burgeoning business trying to crack in?
Yeah, good question. I think it totally, I would start with, what's the local competition out there, right? For us, really, it's the competition is more so the online retailers that may have vast marketing budgets, the department stores type. So that's there. But I would first, yes, analyze what's the local market like. And if there isn't a
Mm,
local company where you can see a showroom and test and feel the products, have someone that actually knows what they're talking about, and knows those products specifically and doesn't maybe no baseline knowledge of like 30 or 40 products, someone that can actually come visit your space and actually, you know, see your space and make sure you can fit said product that you're interested in, uh, sell it, install it, and then potentially repairs, maintenance as years or things change or go by or add-ons may occur,
mm.
then yeah, I would say 100%, you know, and look into those products. But I would say fence, again, I think it just really comes down to competition, right? You could, put the cart before the horse,
Yeah.
chicken before the egg. I think you can look at it both ways. I tell our customers, right? Like you can have a beautiful playground in there, but there's no fencing around it, and you have young kids and dogs. That's not going to do you any good. That could be unsafe. So you want to make sure you have the privacy, security with the fence. So I would say if both are available in the market, I would say maybe start with the fence, and then you can start adding the fun recreational products. So that would be my response to that.
That was a very, I was hoping you'd jump in one camp or the other, but I think your answer was accurate because the environment will, of course, impact the potential of success. So makes sense. How does adding that other product line, I guess it's multiple product lines, but how does adding those other services impact, like what's the operational burden to keep track of those crews?
Yeah, no, great question. I think I would revert back to earlier saying how
Yeah.
we don't have crossover, right? The guy, the installer that's working on your fence for us or for you,
Yeah.
right, is not also doing your basketball hoop at the same time, right? So we have dedicated, salesmen. So right now, I handle basketball hoops, playgrounds, trampolines,
Yeah.
maybe working with my dad or uncle on your fence. And then regarding the installers, we're different, we're per category. So I would be concerned if there was a lot of crossover and prioritization issues in that regard, but we've been doing this now for almost 60 years.
That's
So
crazy,
there's
huh?
been some great operational values that have been instilled, and that really hasn't changed a whole lot. Marketing has changed, communication with customers, right? Texting and email versus, phone calls or mail or just knocking on their door. Things have changed. And even with COVID, that was a big jump. Before maybe we were, sitting down in homes of customers at the kitchen table and going over their estimate. I think now people nowadays are busier and are have an expectation for speed, sometimes over that quality assurance and so forth. So
Mm,
again, we're as old school as it gets in that regards, right? We're still, our estimates are handwritten, but we're tapping into still some must-haves, which are being able to email and text with customers. So every
cool.
customer is different. Every project's different. Everyone deserves to be treated and respected or communicated in the way that's best for them. And that's really important to us and not just treating everyone like a one size fits all situation.
Right. Right. Okay, good. I love that. I have a very specific question. And the question is, I think from hearing the story, I think one of the things that has made, the guy on 41 or Fenceworks like so strong for so long has been, let's call it the old school original marketing, which is like finding your voice and kind of living within your voice, choosing those things that are unique about your company and just not exploiting them, but letting them kind of rule the character of the company. So everyone who has that interaction has encounters those same things. So, and what I mean by that is, a couple examples. You said your grandfather found mailers and you stuck with it for 3 generations. That's a very unique thing. And even today, where there's detractors on mailers, you're like, nah, these kill it. Like, let's just let it run.
Right.
And then the other one with this equipment, that's 20 something years selling playground equipment, and there's gonna be plenty of detractors on there. And I have a lot of conversations with people about finding the voice for your company and finding those unique things. And I think that's something that Fenceworks already does naturally very well, is communicating the voice. And that, so I'm just curious, what advice do you have for, let's say somebody's starting a fence company, or they feel like they have sort of generic marketing and they're sort of plateaued because they sound and look and feel kind of like everybody else. What advice do you have for someone related to finding their voice?
Sure. I think there's some things that you can't just plug in right away, right? Trust and reputation. That's going to take time. I think for myself, I think that mindset of treating every customer independently, right? I think there's best practices and things that you learn from one customer or project to next that you may want to instill or make sure is a permanent thing, such as when the job is done, following up with them to make sure they're happy, or if they need anything, letting them know, hey, we're here as a resource now and in the future. And even customers that may not, go with us for a variety of reasons. I think people genuinely want to work with people that they not only trust, but feel like they know. So even in the marketing, I think social media has been a huge nuance, or not nuance, but thing we've added to our repertoire that we had never done, in our 59 plus years. Something we started last year and a little bit more intense, because people have genuinely said to me, "Hey, Jake, I saw your Instagram, and I felt like I knew you already because you've been talking on camera, and I recognize you." And so I think there's new ways to get caught up to speed. So I guess your question of, hey, is there any advice for someone starting out? I would say try to get on camera. There's a lot of these fence companies, or playground companies or basketball hoop companies may have you that are a little bit faceless, right? They may, um, be, you don't know who you're working with. You don't know who's showing up to your house. You don't know who's installing for you. It's a lot of just questions or assumptions. So I'd say my biggest advice is, yes, be patient. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there and treat everyone, not only with respect, but independently, and listen more than you talk. That would be my overall advice on how to really build up that brand. And people talk. So it's important to be consistent, but also treat everyone individually, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, I have two directions I could go, but my one question is, so 59 years in business now, so at year 58, you decided to dive into social media, which is something I've heard a bit from, the new generation getting involved. What results have you seen or stories have you come across just from posting your YouTube videos, and what's the cadence? Like, what does that process look like for you, and what have you gotten out of it?
Yeah, for sure. I think with all that said, I think it takes time again, both to build up a brand from the word of mouth perspective, but even on your socials, I'd say
Yeah.
you got to get started. Instagram, Facebook, those have been super successful, not only for myself, but as I've talked with other people in the industry. People, again, like not to beat a horse here, but people really want to work with people they know. So I would say, showing off, testimonials or before and afters. I love to take videos when I'm on doing site visits, right? So prior to the person even moving forward, to really show, hey, look, we're not just, taking people's business, right? We want to make sure before you move forward that you know what you're getting, that it's going to be safe, it's going to fit, it's meeting the needs that you're expecting. Because the worst thing you could do is, overpromise and underdeliver, or have a customer that thought they were getting X and got Y. So I think being transparent, and showing that throughout the process, and yeah, going on social media and saying, hey, it's the middle of January, February, it's cold. This customer's maybe not going to be outside that much, but is wanting to plan, and we're out here right now because they can't get that anywhere else in this area. So go the extra mile. But yeah, social media has been successful for us.
A lot of people hate recording. They
Yeah,
hate recording themselves. They find it really cringe to be out there with a camera. So there's always that fear and apprehension. I don't think anybody really likes doing it unless, they have a daughter and they got into doing TikTok dances at one point or another. So what are you recording? Like, what are some examples?
Yeah. So I think a couple things on that. I'd say number one is most times than not, again, there's going to be individuals out there that, are not happy with their lives or their situation and have nothing better to do other than try to tear people down and don't like seeing other people succeed or happy or help other people. It just, it kills them, right? So that's haters, if you want to call it, are going to be there and out there no matter what. So I would say it's easier said than done, right? I'm very prone to taking things personally because I care. And I think um, obviously there's a balance of having a backbone and thick skin, but when
Hmm.
you're, especially talking about a product or a service or something like, that's your baby, you're going to take things personally and constructive feedback can still be tough. But I would say overall, like most people want you to succeed. And if they're absorbing your content, whether it's through the algorithm or they followed you on their page, they want you to succeed. They want to learn something from you. They are interested in working with you or supporting you. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there most of the time. With all that said, types of content, like I think we alluded to earlier, I think is recording the site visits, before and afters, the testimonials, really anything behind the scenes too, because I can't hammer it enough. People want to work with people that they know because there's so many companies and so many other industries, and even in the fence and playground, basketball, hoop, so forth, trampoline industry that, like
Hmm.
I said, are faceless, that you don't have any idea who's behind the company. So the more you can do that, and I think a lot of the viewers of the podcast will agree that they want to work local when they can and buy for people they can. So definitely tap into that if you have the resources and the time. I highly recommend it.
So to get on video, so the things that they should record is just you're saying just pull out your phone, just talk about, why you made the decisions you made
Yeah.
for that fence, and then just maybe try to ignore the keyboard warriors.
Yes. Keyboard warriors. I know
Yeah.
you said it best. I think ultimately, there's a balance, right? Read the room, have social awareness, right? People don't need to, see everything or, hear everything, but
Yeah.
there is something about repetition and know your audience, have that social awareness. There is a balance of being too much or too persistent or too in people's faces, but it's a balance, yeah, finding that rhythm, getting that feedback, but yes, taking one of your friends or a family member or a random person saying like you looked weird doing that or you sounded unprofessional or like I love constructive feedback, but it's again early on, it's easy to take it personal. But once you get used to it, you feed off of it, right? Because
Yeah.
if you want to get better and be the best version of yourself for your own personal brand or your company, you're best to take that. But there is going to be some keyboard warrior stuff that is out of bounds, and you're like, how do people have that much time on their hands? Or they're going out of their way to make you feel that way. It's going to happen. That's just part of yes, putting your face and brand and name out there in this digital world that we live in.
Totally. How many times are you recording a week?
In season, I would say, I'm going on sometimes, 10 site visits in a week myself. So I would say, and again, last year was really the first year that have really kind of fully went all in on it and
Yeah.
still feel like we still have more room to grow and different content ideas to ultimately provide value. But I would say, again, from like a Instagram and Facebook perspective, if you can be posting something at least once or twice a day, that's great. But again, it's finding that balance. Depends on your market, depends on where you're at. So I don't think there's a magic number, but I think depending on the content, there can't be too much, right? If you're doing 10 jobs in a week, right, and you're posting a before and after of 10 of those, post all of them, right? Be
Right.
proud of your work, and people want to see that. So it's subjective.
Got it. Got it. Okay, perfect. Good. Now I want to talk about, I'd love to talk about the future and just kind of things that so I know it sounds like you're focusing on social media yourself. As a company, as a business owner, or as one of the owners of the company with your family, obviously a lot's changed over 60 years, and you've seen that's a crazy 60 years to have a fence company because of the pace of technology and the pace of innovation. And
Yeah,
now you're in another sprint mode, which is totally insane with all this AI stuff coming out. So, what is the company thinking about in terms of, what's next?
sure.
What do the next 10 years look like?
Wow, that's a great question. I think the short answer is we don't know, right? I think honestly you got to keep your ear to the grindstone and be in tune with the market and
Yeah.
technology and AI and all those things that have been evolving very quickly. And I think historically the reputation or the connotation of fence companies particularly is old school and multiple generations.
Mm.
I think we've talked about this a little bit earlier. There is a vast amount of, franchised or private equity backed type fence companies out there that
Yeah.
they have, they're nationwide and they have, a large marketing firm or budget, working behind them. Um, there's those companies. There's going to be the small guy working out of his, garage, and there's everything in between. So I think ultimately people are smarter than we think these days. Not the keyboard warriors, but people in general are more in tuned to read through some stuff and be able to pick up on, you know, those types of companies versus the genuine, more family owned and operated companies that work with. I think there's definitely something to say both in the fence side and playground basketball trampoline side, how many times we've had people that maybe hadn't heard of us or knew that we existed and went with the big box route or went with the big franchise fence company because that's what was in front of them on a billboard or something like that.
Yeah.
And then they're coming back to us to come and clean up and redo their work. And I think that's why it's that much more important for the small local mom and pop shops to, again, they may not have the marketing budgets that the big companies or the big box stores have, but you don't have to, it's not a matter of sometimes the size of the dog in the fight, it's the fight in the dog, right? If you're
Yeah.
able to get strategic with the budget that you have, social media, for example, is compared to, you know, TV commercials, it's a different spend, right? But if you do it wisely and with the right partners or support behind you, you can make that dollar amount, go a long way. So
Cool. Cool. My last question. There may be someone listening who is just starting their fence company for the first time. They're starting at year point one instead of year 60. What advice do you give to someone who's they got their first set of tools, they're looking down the barrel at their first job, they're just starting out?
sure. So, I've only been now with Fenceworks been around for nearly 60 years. I joined the family business a little over 3 years ago. So I'm still learning I'm learning something new every single day. And you have to have some humility in that. I think fences compared to some other industries, more playgrounds or basketball, trampoline, there's maybe degrees out there or courses, but in this space, it's very, very, you know, by your bootstraps, like learning and networking with people that are in the space that have worked before you, have had success. There's no there's not a ton of information or content out there. So my advice is, again, for someone only been in it as long as I have, but I've surrounded myself with, my family who has been here for, nearly 60 years and really just, again, be nice to yourself, right? Understand that yes, there isn't the same resources or education that may be with other industries, and just take each job and opportunity as a learning lesson, and just try to get better each day. But be nice to yourself, learn, be receptive, and get
Hmm.
better each day for your team and for your customers.
Cool. Amazing, man. Amazing. I appreciate it. So that'll wrap our episode. That'll wrap our episode. If anyone has any questions or wants to see examples of the social content, where can they find, do you know your Instagram handle, Jake?
Yes, it's going to be at Fenceworks underscore the guy on 41. You can also check us out at theguyon41.com. And yeah, reach out anytime. I'm more than happy to chat. And yeah, appreciate you having us on, Al. It's been great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for being on. That's it for another episode. I appreciate you being here, and thanks to our sponsor, the Post by Post sponsor, Secure Line Marketing. Have a good one, everybody.